Mommy, is it true? 8-year-old Marcus stood barefoot in the doorway, clutching the old brown notebook his mother had hidden beneath her mattress. His voice broke. Did you really dig through trash cans for 3 years? Just to buy me the bicycle? Elena Brooks stopped breathing. Outside their tiny apartment, leaning against the peeling wall, stood a brand new navy blue bicycle with a silver bell on the handlebar. It should have been the happiest morning of Marcus's life. Instead, the little boy was crying. Elena had dreamed of this moment for 3 long years. She had imagined him running to the bike, laughing, shouting her name, wrapping his small arms around her waist. But she had never imagined him discovering the truth. The notebook in his hands held everything. Every bottle, every can, every late-night trip through dark alleys, every dollar earned from the recycling plant, every painful little total written beneath one sentence, asterisk for Marcus's bicycle. "Don't quit, baby," Elena whispered. Marcus looked at her with eyes too old for a child. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena could not answer. How could a mother tell her son the truth? That love sometimes wore torn shoes, that love sometimes walked through rain after midnight, that while he slept she pushed a rusty cart behind restaurants, gas stations, and office buildings, collecting empty bottles people had thrown away without a second thought. 3 years earlier, Elena had made a promise she could not afford. It was Marcus's 5th birthday. There'd been no party, no balloons, no pile of presents, just one cupcake, one candle. And Elena's mother, Ruth, sitting by the window in a faded yellow sweater, clapping with weak hands. That evening, Marcus stood by the window, watching 2 boys ride bicycles in the alley below. One red, one blue. Their laughter echoed between the brick walls. Marcus did not beg. He only whispered, "Maybe one day." Elena knelt beside him and held his shoulders. "One day soon," she said. "I'm going to buy you a real bicycle." "With a bell?" Marcus asked. "With a bell," Elena promised. 2 weeks later, Ruth collapsed on the bathroom floor. The hospital bills came first, then the rent warnings, then the final notices printed in red ink. Ruth passed away before spring, leaving Elena with grief, debt, and a little boy who still believed his mother's promise. At first, Elena thought the bicycle would only be delayed. 1 month became 6, 6 became a year. Then, too, Marcus never complained. That made it hurt worse. Poor children learned early how to swallow desire quietly. The first empty can change everything. Elena found it after her cleaning shift in a downtown office building. She worked nights, scrubbing floors, emptying trash, and wiping fingerprints from glass doors touched by people who never looked her in the eye. That night, she noticed dozens of soda cans in the recycling bin. The next morning, she pushed them in an old laundry cart to Green Hollow Recycling. The worker weighed them and handed her $4.80. It was almost nothing. But almost nothing was still more than zero. That evening, Elena opened a notebook and wrote, "Asterisk bike fund, 480, then she added, "Astron quit." From that day on, she collected after every shift. Behind restaurants, near bus stops, outside gas stations. In alleys where the wind smelled of rain, metal, and old food, people stared. Some laughed. Once a woman pulled her child away as if poverty could stain. Elena lowered her head and kept going. At Green Hollow Recycling, the workers got used to her. But one man noticed her more than once from the upper office window. An older white man with silver hair, plain work boots, and tired eyes. Everyone called him Mr. Whitman. Elena thought he was only the plant owner. She did not know he was Daniel Whitman, a billionaire who owned recycling plants across the country. She did not know he had noticed her notebook, her cracked hands, the way she counted every dollar as if it were a prayer. One rainy night near closing time, Elena arrived soaked and trembling, dragging her heaviest load yet. She was only $40 short of the bicycle. The night supervisor glanced at her bags and said, "Too wet, $12. Elena's heart dropped. "Please," she said softly, "could you weigh it again?" The man sneered. "You people always beg for more." The room went silent. Then a voice came from behind them. "Put it back on the scale." Daniel Whitman stepped forward. The supervisor went pale. Daniel looked at Elena. "How long have you been doing this?" Elena swallowed. 3 years. Her voice broke. "For my son's bicycle." Daniel held out his hand. "May I see your notebook?" Elena hesitated. Then she gave it to him. He opened it and read the pages slowly. Dates, weights, dollars, hope written in pencil. On the last page, he saw the words, "Asterisk almost there, Marcus turns 9 soon. Please, God, let me keep my promise." Daniel closed the notebook. For a moment, even the rain seemed quiet. Then he looked at Elena and said, "Go home to your son tonight, Miss Brooks. Tomorrow morning, everything will be different." Elena did not understand, not yet. She only knew that when she stepped back into the rain, her pocket held $38.60. And for the first time in years, it felt as if someone had finally seen her. Elena did not sleep that night. She came home soaked to the bone, moving as quietly as she could through the narrow apartment. The clock above the stove read 1:17 a.m. Marcus was asleep on the fold-out couch, one hand tucked under his cheek, his schoolbook still open beside him. For a moment, Elena just stood there and looked at him. The room was cold. The heater rattled like an old man trying to breathe. A thin blanket covered Marcus's small body, but one foot had slipped out into the open air. Elena walked over and tucked it back beneath the blanket, his face softened in sleep. Her little boy, her whole world. She took the money from her coat pocket and placed it carefully inside the coffee tin, hidden behind the flour bag. $38.60, more than she had expected. Enough to bring her closer than ever. Only a little more, only a little longer, but Mr. Whitman's words would not leave her. Tomorrow morning, everything will be different. Elena did not know what he meant. People with money sometimes spoke in riddles. People with power could turn kindness into humiliation if someone trusted too quickly. Life had taught her that help often came with a hook hidden inside it. So she told herself not to hope. Hope was dangerous when rent was due. Hope was dangerous when your child needed shoes. Hope was dangerous when the world had already proved how easily it could take things away. The next morning, Elena woke before sunrise. Her body ached from the storm. Her hands were stiff, the cracks across her knuckles dark from cold and work. She washed them in the sink, careful not to wake Marcus, then made breakfast from 2 eggs and the last slice of bread. Marcus shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Mama. Morning, baby." He sat at the tiny table and smiled when she slid the plate in front of him. "Did you eat?" he asked. Elena lied the way hungry mothers did. "I ate earlier." Marcus looked at her for a second as if he did not quite believe her. But he said nothing. He cut the bread in half and pushed one piece toward her. "You can have some of mine." Elena's throat tightened. "You need to eat before school." "So do you." She sat down because refusing him would hurt him more than hunger hurt her. They shared the bread in silence, and for those few minutes the apartment felt almost peaceful. Then someone knocked on the door. Elena froze. No one came to their apartment this early unless something was wrong. A landlord, a bill collector, a neighbor with bad news. Marcus looked at her, frightened. Elena wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the door. Through the peephole, she saw a delivery man in a dark jacket standing beside something large covered in a gray cloth. Her heart began to pound. She opened the door only a few inches. "Elena Brooks?" the man asked. "Yes, this is for you. I didn't order anything." The man looked down at his clipboard. "It's already paid for, Mom." Behind him, another worker lifted the gray cloth. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. A bicycle. A brand new navy blue bicycle stood in the hallway, shining softly beneath the dim apartment light. Black handlebars, reflectors on both wheels, a small silver bell. The exact bicycle from the shop window. Marcus came up behind her. For one long second, he did not move. Then he whispered, "Mama." Elena could not speak. The delivery man handed her an envelope. "There's a note." Elena took it with trembling fingers. Her name was written across the front in neat black ink. Inside was a single folded letter. "Dear Ms. Brooks, last night you told me you had been collecting bottles and cans for 3 years to buy your son a bicycle. But I have known for some time that your story began long before last night. Over the years I noticed you many times at Green Hollow, in rain, cold, heat, and darkness. I watched you count every dollar with the care of someone carrying a dream larger than herself." Elena's vision blurred. Marcus looked up at her. "Who is it from?" She swallowed and kept reading. "No mother should have to turn the city's garbage into her child's joy alone. This bicycle is not charity, it is respect. It is the first payment on a debt the world owes women like you. Women who work unseen, love without applause, and keep promises when life gives them every reason to break." Elena pressed the letter to her chest. At the bottom was a signature, Daniel Whitman. Then, beneath it, "Please come to Green Hollow Recycling at 10 a.m. There is something more I need to tell you." Marcus touched the bell gently. It gave a bright, silver ring that seemed too beautiful for their hallway. "Can I ride it?" he asked. Elena knelt in front of him. His eyes were shining, but there was confusion there, too. Children understood gifts. But they also understood when adults were hiding the weight behind them. "Yes," she whispered. But only for a few minutes before school. Marcus threw his arms around her neck. "Thank you, Mama." Those 3 words nearly broke her. because the bicycle had arrived from a billionaire, but every inch of it still felt like hers. Every wheel, every spoke, every shining piece of metal had been paid for long before Daniel Whitman ever signed his name. Paid for in alleys, paid for in rain. Paid for by a mother who refused to let poverty steal one more dream from her child. Elena watched Marcus wheel the bicycle carefully toward the stairwell, smiling like the sun had finally remembered their address. Then she looked down at the letter again. "There is something more I need to tell you." A quiet fear moved through her chest, because gifts could change a morning, but secrets could change a life. And by 10 o'clock, Elena Brooks would learn that Daniel Whitman had not only seen her sacrifice, he had been preparing to answer it. At 10 o'clock, Elena stood outside Green Hollow Recycling with Marcus beside her. The boy held the handlebars of his new navy blue bicycle as if it might disappear if he let go. He had begged to bring it with him, and Elena had not had the heart to say no. The silver bell gave a soft ring each time the front wheel bumped over a crack in the pavement. The recycling plant looked different in daylight. At night, it had always seemed like a place built from noise and shadow, metal gates, wet concrete, machines grinding through the dark. But now, beneath the pale morning sun, Elena could see everything clearly. The stacks of cardboard tied with wire, the mountains of crushed cans, the workers in orange vests moving between forklifts and weighing stations, and above it all, the glass office where Daniel Whitman had noticed her for years. Elena tightened her grip on Marcus's shoulder. "You okay, Mama?" Marcus asked. She forced a smile. "I'm okay," but she was not. A bicycle was one thing. A meeting with a man like Daniel Whitman was another. She had lived long enough to know that rich people rarely gave without expecting something in return. Sometimes they wanted praise, sometimes silence. Sometimes they wanted to feel kind without ever touching the pain that made kindness necessary. The front office door opened. Daniel Whitman stepped out himself. He was dressed the same as the night before, simple dark jacket, plain work boots, silver hair combed back, tired eyes that seemed to notice more than they said. He looked at Marcus first, then at the bicycle. A faint smile touched his face. "You must be Marcus." Marcus stood straighter. "Yes, sir." Daniel held out his hand. "I'm Daniel." Marcus shook it with both seriousness and wonder. "Thank you for the bike," he said. "It has a bell. I heard that was important." Marcus looked surprised. "How did you know?" Daniel glanced at Elena, then answered gently, "Your mother's notebook told me a lot." Elena's face warmed. She did not like the thought of anyone reading her private prayers in pencil. But Daniel's voice held no mockery, only respect. "Brooks," he said, "thank you for coming." Elena nodded. "Your letter said there was something more." "There is." He turned toward the building. "Would you come inside?" The office was cleaner than Elena expected. Not fancy, but warm. Old photographs lined the walls, trucks, workers, children planting trees, Daniel shaking hands with people in hard hats. One picture showed a much younger Daniel standing beside a rusty pickup truck, smiling proudly in front of a hand-painted sign, "Whitman Scrap and Salvage." Marcus noticed it. "That's you," Daniel chuckled. "A long time ago." "You were poor?" Marcus asked before Elena could stop him. "Marcus," she said quickly, but Daniel only smiled. "Yes," he said. "Very." The answer settled something in the room. Daniel led them into a small conference room and offered them water. Elena sat on the edge of the chair, back straight, purse clutched in her lap. Marcus sat beside her, still watching Daniel with open curiosity. Daniel placed a folder on the table. "I want to explain something clearly," he said. "The bicycle was a gift. You owe me nothing for it." Elena looked down. "Then why am I here?" "Because the bicycle was never enough." Her eyes lifted. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were papers Elena did not understand at first. Employment forms, housing assistance documents, school scholarship information. A printed proposal with her name on the first page. "I run a foundation," Daniel said. "It supports working families, environmental education, and community recycling programs. For years we have tried to teach people the value of what gets thrown away." He paused. "But you taught that lesson better than any program I have ever funded." Elena frowned slightly. "I don't understand. I would like to offer you a position." She blinked. "A job? A real one? Full-time, stable hours, benefits. You would help lead a new community program teaching families how recycling can create income, dignity, and opportunity. You know this work because you have lived it." Elena stared at him. For a moment she heard only the machines outside. A real job, stable hours, benefits. Words that sounded almost too large to fit inside her life. Daniel continued, "The foundation can also help you move into safer housing. And if you allow it, we would like to open an education fund for Marcus. Elena stood up so suddenly her chair scraped the floor. No, Marcus looked at her in shock. Mama, Elena's hands trembled. No, she repeated softer this time. I'm grateful for the bike, truly. But I can't let you buy our whole life. Daniel did not look offended. He looked as if he had expected fear. I'm not trying to buy your life, miss. Brooks, then what are you trying to do? He folded his hands on the table. I'm trying to honor what you already built. Elena's eyes burned. For 3 years, people had looked at her cart and seen trash. They had looked at her coat and seen poverty. They had looked at her hands and seen someone beneath them. But Daniel Whitman was looking at the same things and calling them proof. Proof of discipline. Proof of love. Proof that she had carried more than bottles through the dark. Still, accepting help felt dangerous. If she said yes, would she lose the only thing poverty had not taken from her, her pride? Daniel seemed to read the question on her face. Pride is not refusing every open door, he said quietly. Sometimes pride is walking through one because your child deserves what is on the other side. Elena looked at Marcus. He was sitting very still, one small hand resting on his bicycle helmet, eyes full of hope he was trying not to show. That broke her more than begging would have. She sat down again. What would I have to do, she asked. Daniel smiled gently. Start by telling the truth. About what it costs to be unseen, about what working mothers carry. About how much value this city throws away, in bottles, in cans, and in people. Elena looked through the glass wall at the plant floor. For years she had entered this place through the side gate, wet, tired, ashamed, counting coins beneath fluorescent lights. Now someone was asking her to enter through the front door, not as a charity case, as a voice. She touched Marcus's hand. I'm scared, she admitted. Daniel nodded. That's all right. Most new lives begin that way. Elena took a long breath. Then, for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to imagine a future larger than survival. Elena did not say yes that morning, not fully. She took the folder home in both hands like it was something fragile, something that might shatter if she believed in it too quickly. Daniel Whitman told her to read everything, to ask questions, to take her time. He did not pressure her. He did not smile like a man who expected gratitude on command. That made the offer harder to refuse. All afternoon the papers sat on Elena's kitchen table. Marcus kept looking at them while pretending not to. The navy blue bicycle leaned near the window, its silver bell catching sunlight each time a car passed outside. For the first time in years, their apartment seemed to hold something brighter than worry. Elena read the offer 3 times, full-time community outreach coordinator, health insurance. Steady salary, paid training, relocation assistance, education fund for Marcus. Each line felt like a door opening. And behind every door stood the same question. What if this is real? That evening, Elena returned to her cleaning job. She moved through the office building with her cart, wiping desks, emptying trash cans, gathering bottles from bins the way she always had. But everything felt different now. The soda cans clinking together in her bag no longer sounded like survival. They sounded like memory. Near midnight, her supervisor, Ms. Trainer, stopped her outside the elevator. You're slow tonight, the woman said. Elena straightened. I'm sorry. I'll finish the east floor before I leave, Ms. Trainer looked at the bag of bottles tied to Elena's cart and curled her lip. You know, this place pays you to clean, not collect junk. For years, Elena would have lowered her head. That night, she only looked at the woman calmly. It was never junk to me, miss. Trainer blinked, surprised by the answer. Elena pushed her cart past her and continued down the hallway. It was a small thing. No raised voice, no argument, no victory anyone else would notice. But inside Elena, something had shifted. The next morning, she put on her best blouse, pale blue, carefully ironed, with one loose thread near the sleeve. Marcus stood at the doorway with his backpack, watching her smooth her hair into place. Are you going to tell Mr. Daniel yes? He asked. Elena looked at him. I'm going to listen. Marcus nodded seriously. That sounds like a yes, trying to be careful. For the first time all week, Elena laughed. At 10 o'clock, she returned to Green Hollow Recycling. But this time, she did not enter through the side gate near the scales. Daniel was waiting at the front entrance. He opened the glass door himself. Good morning, Miss Brooks. Elena glanced toward the yard where workers were unloading trucks. For 3 years, she had stood there with wet bags and aching hands. Now she was walking into the office lobby, and the difference was so sharp it almost hurt. A receptionist looked up from the desk. This is Miss Elena Brooks, Daniel said. She'll be joining the foundation team. The receptionist stood immediately. Welcome, Ms. Brooks, the words landed softly but deeply welcome. No one at Green Hollow had ever said that to her before. Daniel introduced her to the small foundation staff, Karen from finance, Louise from community programs, and Helen, an older black woman with silver braids and kind, watchful eyes. Helen shook Elena's hand with both of hers. "I've heard about you," Helen said. Elena stiffened. "What did you hear?" "That you kept a promise most people would have abandoned." Elena looked away before the tears could rise. The first meeting took place in a sunlit room overlooking the plant floor. On the table were charts, maps, and proposals for community recycling stations in low-income neighborhoods. Daniel asked everyone to speak honestly. Karen talked about budgets. Louise talked about school partnerships. Helen talked about trust. Then Daniel looked at Elena. "What do you think we're missing?" Every face turned toward her. Elena's mouth went dry. For years, rooms like this had belonged to other people. People with degrees framed on walls. People who spoke in polished sentences. People who had never counted nickels beneath a flickering kitchen light. "I don't know the professional answer," Elena said. Daniel nodded. "Give us the true one." She looked through the glass at the mountains of discarded metal below. "The problem isn't that poor people don't know the value of recycling," she said slowly. "The problem is that most programs talk to them like they're being taught a lesson. But many of us already know the value of what gets thrown away. We live with it every day." No one interrupted. Elena continued, stronger now. "If you want families to come, don't start with posters about saving the planet. Start with dignity. Safe collection points, fair weighing, no sneering at people who bring small loads. Childcare during workshops, transportation help. And never make a mother feel ashamed for doing what she has to do." The room stayed silent. Then Helen smiled. "That," she said, "is the program." Daniel leaned back, his eyes bright with quiet pride. Elena looked down at her hands. The cracks were still there, the scars, the roughness. Nothing about them had changed overnight. But for the first time, those hands were not being hidden beneath a table. They were being listened to. By the end of the meeting, the program had a name, the Promise Project. Elena did not choose it, Marcus did. Daniel had asked what the bicycle meant to him, and the boy answered without hesitation. "It means my mom keeps promises even when the world makes them hard." That afternoon, when Elena walked out of Green Hollow through the front door, the sun was low and golden over the yard. She was still scared, still poor, still carrying years of exhaustion in her bones. But something had begun, and this time she was not dragging a cart behind her. She was carrying a key card with her name on it. The key card with Elena Brooks's name on it did not make the world kinder. It only made the cruelty quieter. On her first official week at Green Hollow Foundation, Elena arrived early every morning in her pale blue blouse and the same black flats she had worn for 2 years. She carried a notebook, 2 pens, and a lunch wrapped in foil because buying food outside still felt like wasting money. The front desk greeted her now. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." The words still felt strange. For 3 years she had entered the recycling yard through the side gate, soaked from rain or stiff from cold, dragging bags that smelled of metal, soda, and old streets. Now she walked through glass doors into rooms with polished tables and coffee machines that made drinks she did not know how to pronounce. But not everyone welcomed her. Some employees smiled too quickly. Some looked past her when she spoke. Some called her Daniel's project when they thought she could not hear. The worst was Carl. The same night supervisor who had tried to cheat her out of her load now worked the day shift temporarily while Daniel reviewed staffing. Carl knew Daniel's review could cost him more than pride. It could cost him his job. Whenever Elena passed the plant floor, Carl watched her with tight eyes. One morning as Elena left a meeting with Helen and Luis, she heard his voice near the loading dock. "Guess all you need now is a sad story and the boss gives you an office." The men beside him laughed nervously. Elena stopped. For a moment the old instinct rose in her. Lower your head, keep walking. Survive the insult. That instinct had kept her safe for years. It had helped her pass through grocery aisles with not enough money, office lobbies with too many watching eyes, and nights when men's laughter followed her down empty streets. But now she had a badge around her neck, not because Daniel gave her worth. Because she had always had it. She turned slowly. Carl's smile faded. "I heard you," Elena said. The loading dock went quiet. Carl shrugged. "Didn't say anything untrue." "No," Elena replied. "You said exactly what you believe." She walked toward him, not angrily, not loudly, but with a steadiness that made the others step back. "You think my story got me here. You're wrong. My story is what I survived. My work is what got me here. Carl's jaw tightened. Elena continued, for 3 years I brought materials to this plant. I knew which scales were slow, which bins leaked, which workers treated people fairly, and which ones used shame as a discount. I know the mothers who come after midnight because they don't want their children to see. I know the old men who sell cans to pay for medicine. I know the teenagers who collect bottles so they can buy school supplies. Her voice did not shake now. You saw trash. I saw people trying not to break. No one laughed. Behind her, Daniel Whitman stood near the office door. He had heard everything. But he did not interrupt. Elena was glad. This was not a moment to be rescued from. It was a moment to stand inside. Carl looked away first. That afternoon, Daniel called a full staff meeting. Elena feared he would punish Carl publicly, but Daniel did something else. He stood before the workers, managers, and foundation team and placed an old crushed soda can on the table. This, he said, is worth only a few cents. He lifted his eyes. But when someone brings it here after walking 6 miles in the cold, after finishing a 12-hour shift, after choosing between food and a child's dream, it carries more value than this company has ever measured. The room went still. Daniel turned to Elena. Mrs. Brooks will lead the first community listening session this Saturday. Anyone who thinks this work is charity does not understand this company. It is not charity. It is correction. The word landed heavily. Correction, not pity, not public relations. Not a rich man's generous mood, correction. That evening, Elena rode the bus home with the folder pressed to her chest. Marcus was waiting outside the apartment building with his bicycle, circling carefully in the small parking lot. His helmet was slightly crooked, his smile was not. "Mama!" he shouted. "Watch this." He pedaled from one end of the lot to the other, wobbled once, caught himself, and laughed so hard that Elena forgot the ache in her feet. For a few minutes the world became simple, a boy, a bicycle. A mother standing under a tired streetlight, clapping like he had just won a race no one else could see. Later, over dinner, Marcus asked, "Did people listen to you today?" Elena paused. She thought of Carl, the laughter, the silence after she spoke, Daniel's crushed can on the table. "Yes," she said, "some did." Marcus tilted his head. "And the ones who didn't?" Elena smiled softly. "They will." That night, after Marcus fell asleep, Elena opened a new notebook. Not the old one filled with bottle counts and bicycle dreams. A clean one Daniel had given her for work. On the first page she wrote, "The Promise Project. Listen first. Count people before counting pounds." Then she sat for a long time, listening to the city outside her window. For years she had believed the world changed only for people with money, power, or names carved into buildings. But now she understood something deeper. Sometimes the world began to change when one tired woman finally stopped apologizing for being seen. Saturday morning arrived with a gray sky and a wind sharp enough to make people keep their hands in their pockets. Elena reached the community center before anyone else. It was an old brick building 3 blocks from the neighborhood where she and Marcus lived. The paint around the doors had begun to peel, and one of the front steps was cracked down the middle. But inside, the room was warm. Folding chairs stood in uneven rows. A coffee urn sat on a plastic table beside paper cups, flyers, and a cardboard box of donated muffins. At the front of the room, a banner read, "The Promise Project." Community listening session. Elena stared at the words for a long moment. Listening, not teaching, not judging, listening, that was the part she had insisted on. Daniel Whitman arrived 10 minutes later with Helen and Luis. He carried no speech, no camera crew, no expensive smile for the public, just a stack of notebooks and a quiet nod. "Ready?" he asked. Elena looked at the empty chairs. "No," she admitted. Daniel smiled gently. "Good. That means you care." By 9 o'clock, the first people came in. An elderly man with a cane and 2 bags of crushed cans. A young mother pushing a stroller with one hand and carrying plastic bottles in the other. A teenage boy in a faded hoodie who kept his eyes on the floor. 2 janitors Elena recognized from downtown, then more came, quietly at first, suspiciously. Like people who had learned that free programs often came with hidden shame. Elena understood that look. She had worn it for years. Helen welcomed them at the door. Luis passed out coffee. Marcus sat near the side wall, proud in his clean shirt, his bicycle helmet resting on the chair beside him. He wanted to help, so Elena gave him the very important job of handing out pens. When the room was half full, Daniel stepped forward. Several people stiffened. They knew his face now. The local news had run a small story about the billionaire recycling owner launching a community program. That word, billionaire, made the air uncomfortable. Some people looked at him with hope, others with distrust. Daniel seemed to feel it. "My name is Daniel Whitman," he said. "But today is not about me. I own recycling plants, but I do not own your stories, Ms. Elena Brooks is leading this session." He stepped back. All eyes turned to Elena. Her hands went cold. For 1 second she wanted to hide behind Helen, behind Daniel, behind anyone who knew how to speak in front of people without feeling their heart beat in their throat. Then she saw Marcus. He was watching her the way children watch the person who teaches them what courage looks like. Elena stood. "My name is Elena Brooks," she began. "For 3 years I collected bottles and cans at night after work. I did it to buy my son a bicycle." A murmur moved through the room. Some people had heard the story. Some had not. "I know what it feels like to stand at a scale and wonder if the person behind the counter will treat you fairly. I know what it feels like to carry bags through the rain and pray they're worth enough to matter. I know what it feels like to be looked at like the trash you brought in is somehow attached to your name." The room became still. Elena took a breath. "This project is not here to make anyone feel small. It is here because people who work hard deserve safe places, fair prices, clear information, and respect." An elderly man raised his hand. "My name is Mr. Alvarez," he said. "I collect cans to pay for my medication. But the yard near my building cheats on weight. Everyone knows it." "No one does anything," Elena wrote it down. A young mother spoke next. Her name was Kiara. She said she could collect more recyclables, but there was nowhere safe to bring her toddler while she sorted them. A teenager named Jamal said people chased him away from buildings, even when he only picked up bottles from the sidewalk. One janitor said office managers threw away bags of cans every night, but would rather waste them than let workers collect them. Story after story filled the room. Not loud stories, not dramatic ones, but the kind that proved how heavy ordinary life could become when no one cared enough to notice. Daniel listened without interrupting. Helen wiped her eyes twice. Marcus stopped handing out pens and sat very still. Then Carl walked in. The room shifted. Elena saw him near the back door, arms folded, face hard. He had not come to listen. She knew that at once. He had come to watch her fail. Carl raised his voice. "So what is this really?" he asked. "A place where everybody complains until Mr. Whitman writes checks." People turned. Elena felt the old sting of humiliation return. But this time she did not shrink. She looked at Carl calmly. "No," she said. "This is a place where people tell the truth before men like you put a price on their silence." A low sound moved through the room. Carl's face reddened. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," Elena said. "I think I finally know I was never beneath you." The words landed harder than shouting could have. Daniel stepped forward, but Elena lifted one hand slightly. She did not need rescue, not today. She turned back to the room. "We are going to build collection stations in 3 neighborhoods first. We are going to publish fair weight rates where everyone can see them. We are going to create a hotline for complaints. We are going to offer childcare during sorting hours. And we are going to make sure no one who comes through our gate is treated like they are invisible." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Mr. Alvarez began to clap. Kiara joined, then Jamal, then the whole room. Elena stood at the front with tears in her eyes, not because they were applauding her, but because for the first time, the people who had been unseen were making a sound together. At the back of the room, Carl walked out, but this time no one followed him. And Elena understood that something had changed. Not enough to fix the world, not yet. But enough to begin. By Monday morning, the Promise Project was no longer a quiet idea. It had become a whisper across the city. By noon, it had become a headline. A local news site published a short article about Daniel Whitman's new community recycling program, calling it a rare partnership between a billionaire industrialist and a working mother who collected cans for 3 years to buy her son a bicycle. Elena saw the article during her lunch break. Her photo was there, not a polished photo, not one she would have chosen. It showed her standing at the community center beside Marcus, one hand resting on his shoulder, her face tired but steady. Daniel stood a few feet away, intentionally out of the center of the frame. For a moment, Elena felt proud. Then she read the comments. Some were kind, others were cruel. Another sob story. "People will do anything for free money. Why have kids if you can't afford bikes?" Elena closed the phone before Marcus could see. She told herself words on a screen could not hurt her, but that was not true. Words had weight. They entered quietly and sat inside the chest, especially when they repeated what life had already whispered for years. That afternoon, Daniel called Elena into his office. Helen was there too, standing near the window with her arms folded. Luis sat at the table, his face tight. Daniel held a printed email. "Elena," he said carefully, "there's been a complaint." Her stomach dropped. "About the project, about you?" The room seemed to tilt. Daniel handed her the paper. The email had been sent anonymously to Green Hollow's board. It claimed Elena was unqualified, emotionally manipulative, and using her son to gain sympathy. It also accused her of stealing recyclable materials from the office building where she worked nights. Elena read the words twice, then a third time her hands went cold. "That's not true," she said. "We know," Helen replied at once, but Elena could barely hear her. Stealing. The word opened an old fear inside her. Poor people were always one accusation away from losing everything. A woman like Elena could work honestly for years. But all it took was one polished lie to make people look at her hands and see guilt. Daniel's voice was calm but serious. "The board wants us to pause your public role until we review it." Elena looked up. "Pause temporarily," Louis said. "Just until we answer the complaint." Elena placed the paper on the table slowly. For a second no one spoke, then she laughed once, not because anything was funny, because the pain had no other door to leave through. "So they can believe I'm strong enough to carry their trash," she said quietly, "but not clean enough to lead a project about it." Daniel's face tightened. "Elena, no." She stood. "I understand." Helen stepped toward her. "Baby, don't walk out of this room thinking we believe that email." Elena's eyes filled, but she would not let the tears fall. "It doesn't matter what you believe if the board can make me disappear with one letter." She turned and left before anyone could stop her. Outside, the plant floor roared with machines and metal. Workers moved in bright vests. Forklifts backed up with sharp warning beeps. Everything kept going, as if her life had not just been cracked open by a paragraph from someone too cowardly to sign their name. Near the loading dock, Carl stood watching her. His expression told her everything. He had not written the email alone, perhaps, but he had known. Maybe he had helped. Maybe he had only smiled while someone else did it. Either way, he had been waiting for this moment. Elena walked past him without speaking. That evening, she returned to her old cleaning job. The office building felt colder than before. Her supervisor, Ms. Trainer, met her near the service closet with a folded paper in her hand. "Elena, we need to talk." Elena knew before she said it. "A complaint came in," Ms. Trainer said, "about removed materials from company property. Until this is investigated, we're suspending you without pay." The words landed like stones. Without pay, rent was due in 9 days. Marcus needed new shoes. The refrigerator held half a carton of milk, 2 eggs, and a jar of peanut butter. Elena looked at the trash bins lined against the wall. Bottles and cans overflowed from the top, shining under fluorescent light like tiny pieces of the dream that had started all of this. "I had permission from the night security guard," she said. "He told me anything in the recycling bin was discarded." Ms. Trainer did not meet her eyes. "Bring proof." Elena almost smiled. The world always asked poor people for proof after taking away their chance to gather it. She cleaned out her locker in silence. Inside were gloves, a spare scarf, and a photograph Marcus had drawn of her standing beside a bicycle. Above the drawing he had written, "My mom keeps promises." Elena folded it carefully and placed it in her bag. When she got home, Marcus was sitting on the floor doing homework. He looked up at her face and immediately stood. "Mama?" Elena tried to smile, but the room blurred. For 3 years, she had hidden her pain from him. That night, she could not. She sank into the chair at the kitchen table and covered her face with both hands. Marcus walked over slowly and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. He did not ask about the job. He did not ask about the project. He only whispered, "You don't have to be strong every minute, Mama." And that was what broke her. Not the accusation, not the suspension, not even the fear of losing everything again. It was the tenderness of a child who had already learned how to comfort his mother. Outside, the navy blue bicycle leaned against the wall beneath the window. For the first time, Elena looked at it and felt afraid. Because the dream she had spent 3 years building had opened a door, and now someone was trying to close it before she could walk through. By morning, Elena Brooks had learned how quickly a person could become a rumor. At the bus stop, 2 women from her building lowered their voices when she walked past. At the corner store, the cashier looked at her a little too long before handing back her change. Even at Marcus's school, one mother near the gate glanced at Elena, then leaned toward another woman and whispered. Elena kept her head high, not because she felt strong, because Marcus was holding her hand. Children measured the world through their parents' silence. If Elena bent beneath the shame, Marcus would learn that lies were stronger than truth. So she walked him to the school door, kissed his forehead, and smiled as if her whole life had not begun to tremble. "Will you be okay today?" Marcus asked. "That's my line," Elena said softly. He did not laugh. Instead, he squeezed her hand. "You didn't steal anything." Elena's throat tightened. "No, baby. I didn't." "Then don't let them make you sound small." She watched him disappear into the school hallway, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. And for one painful second she wondered when her little boy had grown old enough to speak like a man who had already seen too much. At Green Hollow, Daniel Whitman was waiting for her outside the front office. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I almost didn't, I know." Elena looked past him toward the plant floor. "Did the board make a decision?" "Not yet, but I did." He led her into the conference room. Helen, Luis, and a security manager named Paul were already there. On the table sat a laptop, several printed statements, and a small stack of old receipts. Elena stopped at the doorway. "What is this?" Daniel pulled out a chair for her. "The beginning of the truth." Paul opened the laptop. "After the anonymous complaint, Mr. Whitman requested a formal review through the office building's management, including access logs, camera footage, and transaction records from the past 3 years. Elena's stomach tightened. 3 years. Her whole sacrifice was being examined now like evidence from a crime. Paul clicked the first video. The screen showed the downtown office building where Elena had worked nights, a loading area, a recycling bin, a security guard in a navy jacket speaking to her. He pointed toward the bin, nodded, then even helped her lift a bag into her cart. Paul paused the video. "This was 2 years ago," he said. "The guard's name is Raymond Ellis. We found him," he confirmed. "He gave Brooks permission to take discarded recyclables as long as they were already placed in the recycling area." Elena covered her mouth. Helen reached across the table and touched her arm. Paul continued, "We also found monthly disposal reports. The office building paid a waste contractor by bulk pickup, not by recyclable return value. There was no financial loss to the company." Daniel slid one paper forward. "And these are Green Hollow receipts. Every load Elena brought in was weighed, logged, and paid under her name. Nothing hidden. Nothing stolen." Elena looked at the receipts. There they were. The tiny numbers that had once seemed almost embarrassing. 487.15s, $11, $3.95. But now those little numbers stood like witnesses. Every can had a date. Every bottle had a record. Every night had proof. Luis leaned forward. "There's more." Paul opened another file. This one showed Green Hollow's loading dock. Carl stood near the scale, speaking with another employee. The audio was rough, but clear enough. Carl's voice came through the speaker. "She thinks she's better than us now. Let's see how long Mr. Whitman keeps his little charity case when the board hears she's been stealing from her night job." Elena went cold. The second employee asked, "You got proof?" Carl laughed. "People don't need proof when the story already fits." The room fell silent. Daniel's jaw tightened in a way Elena had never seen before. Helen whispered, "Lord have mercy." Elena stared at the screen. The story already fits. That was what broke her, not Carl's hate, not the anonymous complaint, but the awful truth inside his words. He knew the lie would work, because people were already prepared to believe it. A poor black mother with bags of bottles, a cleaning woman with cracked hands, a woman who came through back doors and side gates. To people like Carl, she did not need to be guilty. She only needed to look easy to accuse. Daniel closed the laptop. "Elena," he said carefully, "Carl has been terminated. The board has received the evidence. Your public role is restored if you still want it, if she still wanted it." Elena looked down at her hands. Part of her wanted to run, to take Marcus, the bicycle, the little bit of peace they had left, and hide from every person who had watched her humiliation like entertainment. But then she thought of Mr. Alvarez and his medicine cans, Kiara and her toddler, Jamal being chased from sidewalks. All the people whose stories would never be believed unless someone stood in front of the room and made them impossible to ignore. Elena lifted her head. "I want it," she said. Daniel nodded, but his eyes softened with something like admiration. "There is one more thing." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a receipt, old, faded, carefully preserved. Elena frowned. "What is this?" Daniel's voice lowered. "The first load you ever brought to Green Hollow. $4.80. Elena stared at him. "You kept this?" "I keep records," he said. Then, after a pause, "But that one I kept because I remembered your face. You looked at that money like it was the first brick in a house no one else could see." Elena's eyes filled. For 3 years, she had believed her struggle was invisible. But someone had seen the first brick. Someone had remembered. That afternoon, Daniel called a press meeting at Green Hollow. Elena stood beside him. nervous but upright as he released the evidence, clearing her name, and announced new anti-discrimination policies across every Whitman facility. Then he stepped away from the microphone. Elena understood. This time the room was hers. She looked at the cameras, the workers, the board members, and the community families gathered near the gate. "My name is Elena Brooks," she said. "I was accused because someone thought people would believe the worst about a woman like me." Her voice shook once, then steadied. "But I am not here to prove I am worthy of respect. I was worthy before anyone believed me." The cameras flashed. Behind the crowd, Marcus stood holding his navy blue bicycle, tears shining on his cheeks. Elena saw him, and for the first time, she did not feel like a woman defending herself. She felt like a mother changing the room her son would grow up in. The video of Elena Brooks speaking at Green Hollow reached more people than anyone expected. By morning, it was everywhere: local news, community pages, short clips shared by strangers who had never met her but knew exactly what it felt like to be judged before speaking. The headline changed from one platform to another, but the heart of the story stayed the same. A mother who collected cans for 3 years was falsely accused, then stood up and changed the rules. Elena did not know what to do with attention. For most of her life, being noticed had meant trouble. It meant someone questioning why she was in a lobby, why she was carrying bags, why her shoes were worn, why her hands looked the way they did. Attention had always felt like a light used to expose weakness. But this was different. People were not only looking at her, they were listening. Messages began arriving at Green Hollow before noon. A grandmother from Detroit wrote that she collected bottles to help pay for insulin. A father in Milwaukee said he took cans from stadium parking lots after games to afford school lunches for his children. A teenage girl sent a photo of 3 trash bags full of bottles and wrote, "I thought I was the only one embarrassed." Elena read that message twice, then a third time. She sat at her small desk in the foundation office, her fingers resting on the keyboard, unable to move. Helen came in quietly and placed a cup of tea beside her. "You all right, baby?" Elena shook her head slowly. "I thought this was about Marcus's bicycle," she whispered. Helen looked at the computer screen, then back at her. "Sometimes God lets us think we're carrying one promise, so we don't get scared by the size of the real one." Elena closed her eyes. The real one. By afternoon, Daniel Whitman called an emergency leadership meeting. This time, Elena did not sit near the wall. She sat at the table, board members joined by video. Plant managers from other states appeared on screens. Legal advisors, operations directors, and community partners filled the room. Daniel stood at the head of the table, but when the meeting began, he looked at Elena. "You should start." Her heart jumped. "I don't know if I'm ready." Daniel's answer was gentle but firm. "You are the reason we're here." Elena looked around the room. Some faces were kind, some cautious. Some still carried the polite doubt of people who needed numbers before they believed pain. So she gave them numbers. She spoke of unfair weighing practices, unsafe collection sites, people being turned away or mocked for small loads, mothers bringing recyclables at night because shame worked stronger than hunger, elderly people carrying cans for medicine money, children learning too early that poverty had to be hidden. Then she gave them what numbers could not hold. She told them about Marcus standing at the window at 5 years old, wanting a bicycle and asking for nothing. She told them about the first 480, about rain in her shoes, about writing "don't quit" in a notebook because no one else was there to say it. No one interrupted. When she finished, Daniel placed a document on the screen, the Promise Standard, a new company-wide policy. Every Whitman recycling facility would be required to display fair weight rates publicly. Every customer, no matter the size of their load, would receive a printed receipt. All staff would complete dignity and anti-bias training. Complaints could be filed anonymously through an independent hotline. Community collection stations would be built in low-income neighborhoods with safe lighting, childcare hours, and transportation partnerships. And then Daniel added the part no one expected. "The Promise Project will no longer be a pilot program," he said. "It will become a national initiative. Elena Brooks will serve as founding director." The room went silent. Elena turned to him. "Daniel," he did not look away. "You built this from the ground up," he said. "I only finally recognized it." A board member cleared his throat. "With respect, Mr. Whitman, Ms. Brooks has limited executive experience." Elena felt the old sting rise. But before Daniel could answer, Helen spoke. "Experience doing what?" she asked sharply. "Ignoring people." protecting polished systems that needed a poor woman to explain basic decency. The room froze. Helen leaned forward. Maybe it's time we stop confusing titles with wisdom. No one challenged her after that. The vote passed, not unanimously, but it passed. That evening, Elena returned home with the official offer in her bag. Founding director. Salary higher than anything she had ever imagined. Benefits, a relocation package. A future that did not require counting coins beneath the kitchen light. Marcus was outside riding his bicycle in careful circles. When he saw her, he braked too hard and nearly tipped over. "Mama!" "Did something happen?" Elena looked at him. Suddenly, the words felt too large for her mouth. She sat on the front step. Marcus came beside her, helmet crooked, cheeks flushed from riding. "I got the job," she said. "The one with Mr. Daniel?" She nodded. "But bigger. How big?" Elena laughed through tears. "Big enough that we might get a place where you have your own room." Marcus went still. "My own room and maybe a desk for homework. And a place to keep your bike where the rain can't reach it." Marcus stared at her. Then slowly, he leaned his head against her shoulder. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The city moved around them, cars passing, neighbors talking, a siren far away. But for Elena, everything narrowed to the warm weight of her son beside her. After a while, Marcus whispered, "Does this mean you don't have to collect bottles at night anymore?" Elena looked at the scarred hands resting in her lap. "No, baby," she said softly. Not like before. He reached for one of her hands and held it carefully. "Good," he said. "I want you home at night." Those words touched a place deeper than relief. Because the bicycle had been the dream Marcus could name. But this, having his mother safe, present, rested, had been the dream he had never dared to ask for. Later that night, after Marcus fell asleep, Elena opened the old brown notebook one last time. She turned past the bottle counts, the tiny totals, the rain-smudged pages, until she reached the final sentence she had written before everything changed. "Please, God, let me keep my promise." Elena picked up a pen. Beneath it, she wrote, "You did, now keep a bigger one." Then she closed the notebook and placed it on the table. Not hidden beneath the mattress anymore. Not buried like shame. The next morning, she would walk through Green Hollow's front door, not as a woman rescued by a billionaire, but as a mother chosen by her own endurance. And somewhere inside her, the promise that once fit inside a coffee tin had become large enough to open doors for thousands. 6 months later, Elena Brooks stood in front of a crowd she once would have been afraid to face. The grand opening of the first Promise Center took place on a bright Saturday morning in the same neighborhood where Elena had once walked with wet shoes and a cart full of bottles. The building was not fancy, but it was clean, warm, full of light. Outside, a blue sign hung above the entrance, the Promise Center Fair Recycling, Safe Support, Human Dignity First. Below it, smaller words read, "Founded in honor of every person who was ever unseen." Elena stood beside Daniel Whitman, Helen, Luis, and a row of community families. Marcus stood near the front with his navy blue bicycle, now a little scratched from daily rides, but still shining in all the places that mattered. The crowd was larger than anyone expected. There were mothers with strollers, elderly men with bags of cans, teenagers holding plastic bottles, janitors from downtown office buildings, plant workers from Green Hollow, reporters, city officials. Even a few board members who looked slightly uncomfortable standing in a neighborhood they had probably only passed through behind tinted windows. Elena looked at all of them and thought about the first night she had collected cans. She had been ashamed then, not because she was doing anything wrong, but because the world had taught her that survival should be quiet. Today, nothing was quiet. Children laughed near the free breakfast table. Volunteers handed out gloves, collection bags, and information cards. A small childcare room had been set up inside with books, puzzles, and soft floor mats. Near the weighing station, a digital screen displayed rates clearly, where everyone could see. No guessing, no begging, no shame. Daniel stepped to the microphone first. "For many years," he said, "my company measured value in pounds, tons, and profit margins. Then a woman named Elena Brooks reminded us that value also lives in people, especially the people systems are trained to overlook." He turned toward her. "This center exists because she refused to let hardship make her cruel, and because she kept a promise when life gave her every reason to break it." Applause rose gently through the crowd. Elena stepped forward. Her hands shook, but not from fear this time. "My name is Elena Brooks," she began. "For 3 years, I collected bottles and cans at night to buy my son a bicycle." She looked at Marcus. He smiled at her, small and proud. "I used to think that story was about poverty. Then I thought it was about sacrifice. But now I know it was about something bigger. She looked across the crowd. It was about what happens when people are forced to build dignity out of what others throw away. The crowd went still. Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. This center is not charity. Charity can end when people get tired of giving. This is a promise. A promise that fair rates will be posted. A promise that no one will be mocked for bringing a small load. A promise that mothers can bring their children somewhere safe. A promise that workers will be trained to see people, not just materials. An elderly man near the front wiped his eyes. Elena saw Mr. Alvarez beside him, standing straighter than she had ever seen him. Kiara was there too, her toddler balanced on her hip. Jamal stood with a volunteer badge pinned to his hoodie. All their stories had helped build this room. And most of all, Elena said, this is a promise that no one should have to become invisible in order to survive. The applause came like weather. It moved through the crowd, through the open doors, through the bright morning air. Elena closed her eyes for 1 second and let herself hear it, not as praise but as proof. Proof that a life could bend without breaking. Proof that a mother's hidden labor could become a public door. Proof that a little boy's bicycle could roll farther than anyone imagined. After the ribbon was cut, the center opened. People stepped inside carefully at first, as if kindness might disappear if touched too quickly. Volunteers helped weigh bags. Children played in the childcare room. Helen sat with 2 grandmothers and explained the new complaint hotline. Luis registered families for transportation support. Daniel stood near the entrance, watching quietly. Elena approached him. "You did this," she said. Daniel shook his head. "No, I had money. You had the reason." For a while they stood in silence. Then Daniel reached into his coat pocket and handed her something small. It was the old receipt. The first one, $4.80. Elena stared at it. "I thought this belonged in the center," he said. "Not in my drawer." Inside the building, near the front desk, a glass frame had been prepared. Elena placed the receipt inside. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The first brick." Her eyes filled. Marcus came to stand beside her. "That was the first money?" he asked. Elena nodded. "The first." He looked at the receipt, then at his bicycle outside. "All that started with $4.80? "No," Elena whispered. "It started with a promise." Marcus slipped his hand into hers. By late afternoon, the crowd thinned. The sun lowered behind the rooftops, turning the windows gold. Elena stepped outside and found Marcus sitting on his bicycle near the curb. "You ready to go home?" she asked. He looked up at her. Which home? For a moment Elena did not understand, then she smiled. Their new apartment was only 10 minutes away now. 2 bedrooms, a working heater, a small balcony, and enough space for Marcus's bicycle to stand safely inside. Some mornings Elena still woke expecting the old ceiling, the old cold, the old fear. But life had begun to teach her a new language. "Safety, rest, morning light, our home," she said. Marcus grinned. He rang the silver bell. The sound floated through the air, bright and clear. Daniel, Helen, and Luis stood by the doorway, watching them leave. Elena raised one hand in goodbye. Then she and Marcus started down the sidewalk together. Not rushing, not hiding, not counting cans. Not bracing for shame, Marcus rode slowly beside her. At the corner, he stopped and looked back at the Promise Center. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." "Do you think other kids will get bikes too?" Elena looked at the building. At the family still inside, at the sign above the door glowing softly in the evening light. "I think they'll get more than bikes," she said. Marcus tilted his head. "What's more than a bike?" Elena smiled. "A chance to dream without feeling guilty." He thought about that, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. They continued walking. Years from now, people would tell the story in different ways. Some would say a billionaire changed Elena Brooks's life. Some would say a poor mother's sacrifice inspired a company to change its rules. Some would remember only the bicycle, the notebook, the receipt, or the speech. But Elena would always remember the truth. No one saved her by seeing her once. She had been saving herself every night for 3 years, 1 bottle, 1 can, 1 promise at a time. The world had only finally caught up. As the evening settled over the city, Marcus rode ahead beneath the warm streetlights, his laughter rising above the traffic. Elena watched him, her heart full and quiet. For the first time in years, she did not feel like she was chasing survival. She was walking beside the future, and this time the front door was open.